What's going on, guys? Try back again here, bringing another video. This one's going to be doing a career in review, my third career in review. This time I'm going to be talking about the Huntington Beach bad boy, Tito Ortiz. So if you guys haven't seen my other two, I started with Fedor Emelianenko, then I did Brock Lesnar, and now I'm going to go on to Tito. So Tito hasn't quite retired yet, similar to Fedor, but, pretty much his career is getting close to its end now. So, I felt, might as well do a career interview here. It looks like Tito is probably going to try to end his career with a third fight against Forrest Griffin. So, regardless of what happens with that, he's not going to be in title contention again. It looks like I think his career in terms of title contention is pretty much over, and I think he's probably going to be hanging it up within the next year or two. So, decent time to do a career in review. Now, before I start this review, I will say that a very good documentary you can check out. You can download it online, or you can even rent it. This kind of stuff is called UFC Bad Blood. And what UFC Bad Blood was is basically it's a documentary, and it focuses on sort of some of the darker years of the UFC when they were very close to going bankrupt, and you had a couple guys that could sell events in the UFC, but a lot of the guys couldn't. There was only a few. Like you had Chuck Liddell, who could sell events and would make them a lot of money. Tito Ortiz, who was huge because he was such a good entertainer. Randy Couture was really big as well. Aside from that, you had a couple of heavyweights like later on there was Tim Sylvia, who I don't know, he was kind of off and on sometimes. I think he sold okay. Andre Arlovsky, guys like this. Before that, you had Ken Shamrock, some of the other guys from the earlier days still kicking around. And it's just it's a very interesting documentary, and I highly recommend anybody who's interested in hearing about that time of the sport. It involves a lot of Tito, a lot of Chuck, and their rematch, almost a trilogy, but at the last moment Tito pulled out of the third fight when he was supposed to fight Chuck the third time. Tito's had a lot of three-peats. He fought Ken Shamrock three times. He almost fought Chuck three times, fought him twice, and he's probably going to be fighting Forrest now three times. So, he's had a lot of three-peats in his career. So it's, I don't know. But anyway, I can't recommend the documentary enough, UFC Bad Blood. It's a lot of fun. There's some scenes with Dana White in there, doing some interviews talking about Tito and what he did and his choices. Chuck Liddell is in there talking about how much he hates Tito pretty much and all that kind of stuff. There's a little bit of Ken Shamrock, but not too much because, as you guys know, Ken Shamrock, who I also need to do a career in review for, is not a UFC guy anymore. Dana White, the UFC, they do not like Ken Shamrock for some reason. I have to look into it. I don't know exactly why. I know for a fact they hate Ken Shamrock and they hate the Lions Den. The UFC, pretty much anybody who trains the Lions Den, they probably will not sign. I'll have to look into the history of that a little bit more before I do a video talking about it. But yeah, it's just a fact of the matter. They do not like Ken Shamrock. Dana White, the Fertitas, they don't like him. But these were the guys that really, Tito Ortiz, Ken Shamrock, Chuck Liddell, Randy Couture, pretty much those guys were the guys that saved the UFC from bankruptcy. Tito Ortiz, Ken Shamrock, they saved the UFC. The UFC was so close to selling. They were so close. The Fertitas and Dana White, they were so close to selling the UFC, and they decided that they would, let's keep trying, let's keep seeing what we can do, because they weren't getting good enough offers for it. Basically, guys were giving them, they were bottoming them out in offers. They were giving them crappy offers for next to nothing compared to what it was worth, and Dana White and the Fertitas made the decision to continue on. But the guys that helped them do that are the guys in Bad Blood mostly. Like I said, Ken Shamrock, Tito Ortiz, Chuck Liddell, Randy Couture. Those are the guys that really saved the UFC. So let's start with Tito, and then later on I may talk about Chuck, do a review of Chuck's career. Ken Shamrock is one I want to do. That's definitely on my list. Randy Couture is definitely one I want to do. And I'm going to do a video talking about the Pride Fighting Championships. Just a review of Pride, and the Pride era, because I think that that's a very interesting time where you had a different league other than the UFC that was really big. So anyway, that's enough of me talking about other stuff I want to do or I'm going to do sooner or later. Let's get right on to this video, a career in review of the Huntington Beach bad boy, Tito Ortiz. So let's start from the top. So I think, it's been so long ago, I can't even remember the first time I saw Tito. I want to say it was probably Looking at his record here, I think it was against Frank Shamrock. I think, yeah, either him or Ken. It was against either, no, yeah, it would be Frank Shamrock. I remember when he fought Shamrock. So Tito Ortiz came in pretty much at, UFC 13, just near the big, the beginning of when the UFC was just getting off its feet. It only had, like 13 events. It hadn't had that many before that, and he just got started. So I don't remember some of these because these were in some of the dark ages, and some of these are hard to find tape on, hard to find videos on, even on YouTube. Some of them, you have to kind of look up because you just don't see them that often. His first one was over a guy named Wes Albritton. I don't remember this one at all, and it was from TKO punches. Then he faced, this is where it all started with the Lion's Den. I remember this one. Guy Mezger, okay? So he lost to Guy Mezger by a guillotine choke. The Lion's Den, man, they are a gym that, really has not been given their just due. I don't know what it is about the Lion's Den and why the UFC has blacklisted them, but they really have blacklisted all of the Lion's Den. Any of the Lion's Den guys cannot fight in the UFC anymore, pretty much. That's all there is to it. So I'll have to do a video talking about that later. Anyway, so Guy Mezger, yeah, he beat Tito. So Tito was 1-1 at this point. And I remember this. This is where the whole bad blood started between Tito and Ken and everything that was going on between the two of them. I remember, Ken Shamrock later on, jumping up on top of the cage and pointing down at Tito and shouting at him and yelling at him because he was being disrespectful. His whole, like, Tito had that entertainment factor about him. He had that entertaining part of him where he would come out and he would, be jumping around like this back and forth with his double-sided flag and his cap on, and he was all about the entertainment value, man. It was entertaining to see Tito come out at even still, but definitely in his prime, he was great, man, because he would come out and he would have, like the flames on his stuff, really cool gear that he was wearing, come out, all pumped up, he jumping around, and then after the fight, he would do the dig in the grave, and just kind of like covering it and stuff like that. It was very cool stuff, and I think that's pretty much what made Ken Shamrock pissed off, was because he did that shit. So we'll get into that later. So then he fought Jeremy Screeton. Again, I don't remember a lot of these guys. Jerry Bolander, I remember him. Beat Jerry Bolander. Here's where it started. So then it was a rematch between him and Guy Mezger. And he beat Guy Mezger by a TKO from punches. This was in 1999, UFC 19, way back. So I think this is the one I was referring to, where he, he beat him, and then that's when Ken jumped up on the cage, and the bad blood between the two started. Like they really, it seemed like they really didn't like each other in general. I think after they fought each other 3 times, I think Ken was like, okay, whatever. I did it, kind of did it for money, that kind of thing, whatever. We made our money together. But I still think that the Tito didn't really like Ken, not really. I mean, it really seemed like, when Ken would say things like that to Tito, he was just like, like, screw you, buddy. You know what I mean? Whatever. He doesn't like Ken, I think, just overall. I still think he doesn't like Ken, even though I don't think that Ken harbors any bad blood towards Tito nowadays. He definitely did back in the day. He definitely didn't like him. Either that, or he put on a hell of an act. And Ken was a little bit into that WWE stuff too. So you never know if it was 100% fabricated. I don't think it was, because I think Ken was genuinely upset at the way Tito would perform his celebration after he win matches with the dig in the grave thing. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I still don't know how I feel about his celebration and whether or not it's disrespectful. Yeah, I mean, it is pretty disrespectful now that now I think about it. It is pretty disrespectful. So okay, going on from there, he lost to Frank Shamrock. This was the one where just Tito basically he got submission from punches. Tito has never really been a striker. He's always kind of been a good wrestler who's got pretty good defensive striking. He's not the easiest guy to knock out. He can defend pretty well, but he's not a great offensive striker. He's really not. He never has been, really. He's always struggled with that. It's kind of sad to see that over his whole career, he was never able to evolve his striking game good enough to be able to mess with guys stand up like Chuck or any of these other guys. You think, I mean, if it's your career and stuff, you'd be able to, but he really mixed up the wrestling a lot, and I don't think he trained striking quite enough, as he should have. So then he lost to Frank Shamrock. That was kind of like the Lions Den victory, but that obviously that wasn't the end of it. We'll come back to that a little bit later. So then he goes on. He fought Vanderlei Silva. So Vanderlei Silva. Here's where yeah, he won the UFC light heavyweight championship over Vanderlei. So now this is a big win. A lot of people this was UFC 25. Vanderlei Silva after this win went on to go to Pride. I think right after this win or a couple fights, maybe before or after Vitor. I can't remember the dates for those, but Vanderlei Silva went on to Pride to be completely dominant in the Pride division. Like he was undefeated for the longest time, just smashing guys. I remember, just the axe murder, man, crazy, just absolutely crazy. So Tito's win over Vanderlei was huge, man, because Vanderlei's a killer, and Tito just took him down and just over and over and over again and won the decision of that fight. So going on from there, he fought Yuki Kondo. Again, it's just too long. I don't remember this one. It was a submission neck crank. Evan Tanner. This was a great slam. This is probably Tito's best knockout ever. Yeah, I got to say this is his best knockout ever. This is the one where I guess he bear hugged him, so to speak. He got underhooks, got him kind of like a bear hug, underhooks, and then he kind of lifted him to the side. He stepped in, and he picked him up, and he slammed him. Just power, man. Power all the way through. Defended his UFC light heavyweight championship here. Just powered down and just boom. The second Evan Tanner hit the mat, you knew he was unconscious. He was totally unconscious. It wasn't the punches after that knocked Tanner out. It was the slam. And that's always cool because think about it. How many times in UFC history have you seen a fighter get KO'd from a slam? It almost never happens. I've only seen it a couple times. Tito Ortiz did it here, just a fucking power slam, man. Just something you'd see in WWE, because you're just thinking like, is a guy going to be able to ragdoll another guy like that in, professional fighting? It's so rare to see a guy like Tito or anybody else, just totally grab a guy, ragdoll him, and just slam him down to the point where the guy's unconscious. The only other time I can think of is Matt Hughes. But Matt Hughes was interesting because it was with Carlos Newton. He was caught in a triangle. He lifted him up to the top of the cage and kind of sat there for a minute. Matt Hughes passed out. And when he passed out, he dropped Carlos Newton. Or maybe he put a little bit of energy into the slam. But anyway, he dropped him on his head and he knocked Carlos Newton out from a slam from the top of the cage. It was like a power bomb because he was in a triangle. So, yeah, and then Rampage has also knocked out Ricardo Arona with the power bomb slam. Slam Page, that was a nice one. But nowadays, we don't see hardly any slam knockouts. So that was Tito's best knockout over Evan Tanner. I think so. Then he beats Elvis Sinasek. Again, defending the light heavyweight championship. Let's see here. He held the UFC light heavyweight championship from 2000 all the way through to pretty much to 2000. So he held it for about a year and a half, and then he took time off and eventually lost it to Randy Couture. So, Tito held the light heavyweight championship in the UFC for a long time. And this was probably around here is when Tito was at his best, pretty much before he left to do his acting gig. This is when he was getting into his best years right here. The slam on Evan Tanner, Elvis Sinasek, the win over him, Vladimir Matyushenko, he won a decision over him, and then a TKO corner stoppage against Ken Shamrock. So here's where this was the dark ages right here. Right in between this fight right here from 2002, UFC 40 against Ken Shamrock. Within the next couple of years, this was really where the UFC was in big trouble. Ken Shamrock against Tito was a huge fight because they both, they had the footage of Ken talking shit to Tito after the fight, pointing at him and yelling at him and doing all that crazy stuff. And you had Tito, who's like the loudmouth and the entertainer, and he's the, the defending, reigning light heavyweight champion. And, they fought each other. This was the first time they fought, and Tito smashed him up pretty good. Ken Shamrock also had the exposure, just like Brock Lesnar does today, maybe not, or a couple years ago, maybe not quite to the same extent. But because Ken Shamrock was messing with the WWE first, and he was in the beginning of the UFC, Ken Shamrock was a legend. So to put him in a light heavyweight, championship fight against Tito, that was a huge fight. And I think that's why we got to see them fight 3 times. I think that's why we kept seeing them fight over and over and over again. It's because the UFC needed money. A lot of their events weren't making money. They were losing money, and they were in danger of going bankrupt. So every time they had the opportunity to put Ken and Tito together, they knew they were going to make money off that event. So they did it just because even if they'd already fought each other. I mean, if Ken Shamrock TKO stopped, or sorry, Tito Ortiz TKO stopped Ken Shamrock in the first fight, there's no reason for them to fight 3 times. But they did it because they needed the money, and you know what I mean? They just were in dire straits. They had to do what they had to do to make the money. So then right here, I think this is the peak of Tito Ortiz's career. He was 10-2, beats Ken Shamrock, and he takes a year off to do his acting thing. So, you know, as you can see, if you watch UFC Bad Blood, right here is pretty much where, you know, Tito Ortiz took that year off, went to do the acting thing. You know, maybe money-wise, it was worth it. Financially, it was worth it. But I really feel like this is where Tito's skills kind of, you know, declined, because when he came back, he basically fought Randy Couture to, unify the titles, and he lost to Randy in this fight. Now, he was supposed to fight Chuck for the longest time, and there was all these rumors and stuff, and them saying that Tito basically didn't want to fight Chuck. Chuck said he didn't mind fighting Tito. Tito and Chuck were friends. Now, here's the thing. Tito says that him and Chuck were friends. Chuck says they weren't. I don't believe that. I believe Tito, you know, even though Chuck says, oh, we weren't friends, yada, yada, whatever. No, I think they were friends, you know, and I'm not saying that, like Tito Ortiz is just, you know, talking trash, whatever. No, I really think they were. I mean, there are a lot of pictures of them training together and look like they're having fun together and that kind of stuff. So to me, the proof is there.